So following the harrowing news of the tragedy that was unfolding in Parkland, Florida, I found myself in an interesting place. I found myself wondering, I found myself asking, what is the purpose, really, in these times of spirituality in general, of spiritual communities such as ours? What purpose do we serve? What is our role, if any, to play in these times? And I was reflecting that since the last presidential elections, many of us truly flocked to organizations whose purpose is to be active in social and political activism. Because naturally, with what has been unfolding for the past year, each of us feel called to find an outlet where we can have an impact, where we can make a change, where we can do something. And especially after this week, where we know full well that our so-called representatives will do absolutely nothing to protect our children, our grandchildren, their grandchildren, from being brutally murdered while going to school. So the impulse that we all feel is, I want to do something. I have to do something. And so I was really asking, is this really what is being called forth in this time of our history? And if so, if at all, what is the purpose of spirituality, of spiritual congregations like ours? What role really is there for us to play? And I believe from the core of my being that our role is absolutely critical. You see, spirituality isn't something that we attend to after having done all the things we had to do, having worked through everything we had to work. Spirituality is our base. Spirituality is the foundation. Spirituality is the sacred space we spring forth in order to impact the world in whichever way we are going to impact the world. Spirituality is the place where we can, and spiritual communities are the places where we can rest, where we can resource, when we can reconnect to the truth of being. Where we can be reminded that yes, there are a million things to do on the outside to fix things. But it's far more important to take care of the need of connecting and reconnecting with Source on the inside. I believe that one devoid from the other will cause us to dry out, will cause us to act in ways that are no longer grounded, no longer centered into the heart space. that in fact will multiply what we are trying to avoid: more anger, more hatred, more polarity, more opposition. Those of us who have had the honor to care for a loved one, a family member who has been through a protracted illness, know that it is critically important to care as well for the caretakers, to provide for them a kind of spaciousness where they too can get a break, can rest, can heal, can feel nurtured, can be grounded. And I believe that spiritual communities are that kind of space. For all of the peaceful warriors fighting all the good causes and the great battles, to be a container where they can come to reconnect with Source, to be reminded that despite the seemingly separation on the outside, there is an underlying oneness that brings us all together. That instead of acting from a place of anger and frustration and resentment, and we can dip into this space and find a way to act from a place of love and compassion and care. This is the sacred space that we create here together. A place where we can come to cry and to laugh together. A place where we can come to celebrate and mourn together. A place where we can simply sit in silence together. ועשו לי מקדש, ושכנתי בתוכם. This is one of the most famous verses in all of Torah. It is at the beginning of this week's Torah portion. The Israelites are still encamped at the foot of Mount Sinai. They're going to be there for a while because God has just asked them to do one thing. God is asking them as it is asking us. עשו לי מקדש. Create a sacred space, and I will dwell within. The Torah is teaching us, and before we embark on a journey towards whatever promised land we seek to find, whatever journey is part of our life purpose, that first and foremost, we have to take the time to create sacred space in our life, to carve out sacred time in our too busy days. We need to have this kind of container where we can come together and really find community. Community is so critical in these days when we are more and more alienated from each other, more and more isolated in this world. And to have a place to gather in solidarity and in support of each other, I believe is radical. Radical. It shouldn't be, but it is. And that's why I believe that now more than ever, we need spiritual communities such as ours. Now more than ever. We need spiritual communities that can share from the teachings of our tradition, our millennia-old tradition, share from this teaching and show a different perspective, a different path forward, a different way of looking at human purpose on this earth that is able to invite those who want to challenge the paradigm in which we are now living, to have a place to do that, to have a place to talk to one another, to dream with each other, to vision a new paradigm, because the one we're living in, by all accounts, is detrimental to life itself. Is detrimental to life itself. And so we must, in fact, we must come together to begin, young and old, to find a different path forward, to dream a different dream, to know a different way, to be inspired by each other, to be inspired by these words of our tradition, who tells us, our rabbis tell us from this Ve'asuli Migdash, they remind us of one of the critical precepts that is, as above, so below. That in fact this universe is not just a place where there is one tabernacle in the middle of earth, in the middle of the desert, and that is the only holy place in the world. No, they remind us, as above, so below. That this entire created universe, this entire cosmos, is a tabernacle, is a temple. That in fact, they are but temples, tabernacles within tabernacles, within tabernacles, within tabernacles, all the way down and all the way up. One of the names of God in our tradition is Hamakom, the place. There is no mistake. Our tradition understood that this entire created universe is Hamakom, is the place. This is the sacred place of which we are a part. All of it and all that is within it. You and me. Sacred space. Each and every body, a temple. Every being, human or non-human, a container of the divine light. Every aspect of our biosphere, a divine sanctuary. These are the teachings of our tradition. Can you imagine? Can you imagine a world where all of us would live from that place, would live from that understanding of sacredness through and through? In everyone, in every being, through every eyes, no matter what skin color, no matter what language, height, shape, form. What would that look like? Just take a moment to imagine what would that look like, because our tradition is asking us to do exactly that, to dream a world where this would become reality. What would that look like? Because if we don't begin to dream it, if we don't begin to vision it, if we don't actually put it as a model, speak it as a model into the universe, then it's only going to stay in our minds. But our tradition believes that once we speak it, once we create it, once we visualize it, once we share it with each other, then we have impacted the tapestry of the universe itself. Then those energies, those words, will eventually manifest. And that's why our synagogue is one of the synagogues, our spiritual community is one of the spiritual communities that we need to have around. For that reason as well. We are a harbor for those needing of healing, for those yearning to connect with Source, so that they can go out in the next day to impact the world in the gorgeous ways they can. And we also need to be the place where these kinds of teachings can be shared, where practices are offered so that each and every one who comes through these doors can find within him or herself or themselves the truth that this teaching seems to convey, that these teachings point to. That we might all realize that just like the Israelite is in this mythological wilderness, all of us are still wandering Jews and non-Jews, traveling together onto this little blue dot in the middle of this amazingly vast universe. And that perhaps we have lost our sense of direction. So I am grateful. I'm grateful for each and every one of you, for the ways you create this sacred space by your presence, by your volunteering, by your sharing of your financial abundance, so that this container can exist, not just for us who are already here, but for those who are not yet here, those who are somewhere in Seattle heartbroken tonight because of what has happened this week and have nowhere to go to process, to heal, to talk, to make sense. We need you, we need each other to keep the doors of this community open for millennia and to invite those to come in.